My name is Dan Chavas. I'm an associate professor of atmospheric science in the Department of Earth, Atmosphere, and Planetary Sciences at Purdue University. Yeah, so there are not obvious trends in the number of hurricanes overall. That number has remained relatively steady over the past few decades. There's some evidence that hurricanes are becoming gradually more intense, and so as a result, they're more frequently reaching a major hurricane status, which is category 3, 4, or 5. But specifically at landfall, which is where we care about them, it's harder to see trends there, in part because there's just fewer storms, and so there's no obvious trends at this point. So the hurricane season is gradually expanding with time, and we believe that's associated with global warming. So the typical season is from June 1st to November 30th. That's the standard definition of the hurricane season, and it seems to be starting a little bit earlier, something like a couple days per decade, and also expanding a little bit later as well. So we've seen more frequently storms occurring before June 1st and after November 30th. And this is because the climate's warming, the environment in which hurricanes form is becoming more favorable, kind of on the shoulder seasons, on the edges of the typical season. When we think about hurricanes, we care about their impacts. The hurricanes themselves may be changing, but ultimately hurricanes impact society through the hazards that they create. So we typically think about wind, so direct wind damage, inundation from storm surge, and then inland flooding from rainfall. So we expect rainfall to increase rapidly with warming. That's a change that we're already seeing today, because warmer air can hold more water vapor. We expect storm surge to increase, especially driven by sea level rise, as the sea levels are rising, which is something that's happening more gradually. And then we expect the winds, the peak winds in hurricanes, to become gradually stronger, though that's a slower effect. So on top of that is another effect, which is that when we talk about impacts, we're talking about things that we have in the way of the hurricane, so what we call exposure. And we continue to build and put more things along the coasts and just generally in the areas that are at risk for being hit by the hazards from hurricanes. And so that's something that adds on top of it, is that when hurricanes make landfall somewhere, we generally have more people and more things in the way, and so there's more things to damage. We don't know how, when we think about the total impact from hurricanes, it's not just how strong the storms are and their hazards, but also how frequently they occur. And so we don't know how the number of storms is changing, and particularly the number of landfalling storms is changing. There's not really strong evidence of changes in landfalling storm number. But even if we just say, well, we're not really sure how that's going to change in the future, but if we just assume that stays constant, because we know that each individual storm is more likely to be more damaging, that taken together, we expect hurricanes overall to become worse. So, yeah, people should prepare for hurricanes by making a plan for themselves and their family. So a great starting point is ready.gov. It's a government website that has a brochure with a nice diagrammed plan called How to Prepare for a Hurricane, and that's a great place to start. So that's going to give you a chance to think about what are the important things that you need for your house, resources to look for within your community. Basically just get you to prepare ahead of time. It's something that is really important. Evacuation and planning prior to a storm takes time. It can take days. Things can get crazy leading up to a storm. Supplies can become short. That's not a time to start planning. You want to plan ahead of time before the season starts. It's never too late to do it, but the earlier you can do it, the better. And this is important because we have forecasts, and you should be listening to your forecasters as well, but forecasts are never perfect, and so it's always better to be prepared for any circumstance that arises.